Along the eastern side of the African continent, two tectonic plates have been pulling apart for millions of years. In the space left between them, a large valley has formed. Known as the Great Rift Valley, it extends over 7,000 kilometers, from Lebanon to Mozambique. Nestled in the southeastern portion of this valley are a series of massive lakes, known as the African Great Lakes. Their combined water accounts for 25% of all the unfrozen fresh water on the surface of the Earth. And what's more amazing is that within these lakes, 10% of all known freshwater fish species are found. These lakes are home to a group of fish known as the cichlids. Cichlids are not unique to these lakes, however. These fish rarely exceed 30 centimeters in length and are differentiated from other fish by several physiological features. But one of the most noticeable is something as simple as the number of nostrils they have. It might be surprising to know that fish have nostrils, but they do. And while they aren't used for breathing, they are used to pick up smells in the water. Most fish species have 4 nostrils, 2 on either side of their heads. But in cichlids, these nostrils have fused, forming a single hole on either side. Cichlids are known for a few other things as well. For one, they can often be extremely colorful, accounting for some of the most beautiful freshwater fish on Earth. They're also extremely charismatic. These fish are often territorial and show amazing displays as they fight for space or for mates. Many species are sexually dimorphic, meaning that males and females look entirely different, with the males displaying insane iridescent colors, while females can remain quite drab. Cichlids can be found in tropical and semi-tropical waters around the world. They're least abundant in Asia, with 3 species being known from India and Sri Lanka, and 7 being known from the Middle East. In the Americas, their diversity is impressive, from huge Oscars to tiny dwarf cichlids, angelfish to discus, firemouths to rainbow-colored geophagus species. American cichlids are some of the best known in the aquarium trade today. These fish range from semi-aggressive to lone predators, and they're kept in a wide range of aquarium setups. But in order to really appreciate cichlid diversity, one needs to look at Africa. African rivers are home to some beautiful and interesting species, like jewel cichlids, crebensis cichlids, and the goby-like lionhead cichlids. This species inhabits fast-moving waters of the lower Congo, and so have a modified swim bladder that allows them to sink to the bottom so they can't be swept away by the currents. They're also unique because of the large lump that forms on their heads, especially in males. In Madagascar, ancient lineages of cichlids roam the waterways. As is the case with most species on the island of Madagascar today, they are almost all endangered in the wild. One of the most beautiful are the starry night species. Depending on which expert you ask, there are between 2 and 4 species of this cichlid, with jet black scales and spots that range from white to yellow to blue. They stand out for their unique markings. Perhaps the rarest cichlid in the world is the Malagasy cichlid. Described in 2006, this species was only found in the Sofia River in northeastern Madagascar. In 2013, Aquarium Berlin attempted to breed their last female with one of their 2 remaining males, knowing that they were extremely rare in the wild and in the aquarium trade. Unfortunately, this resulted in the death of the female. Around the same time, the Sofia River completely dried up, leading experts to believe that the species was likely extinct in the wild. Scientists began to desperately seek help from other zoos who might have had a female in their collections. But the answer from everyone was no. So they turned to the public. Once again, no one had the species in a private collection, Then, along came a so-called fish whisperer and fish expert, known as Guy Tam Hyok. He claimed to know of a pool in Madagascar that still contained the fish. And believe it or not, he was right. 18 were collected from the wild, and a breeding program began in Toronto, Canada. In 2016, the species successfully bred, leading to at least 20 hatchlings being produced. The Malagasy cichlid was nearly lost because of extreme environmental disruption in Madagascar. And sadly, this case isn't a one-off. To see how human interference in an environment can wreak havoc on species, one only needs to look as far as Lake Victoria. Lake Victoria is the 4th largest lake in the world, and used to support a vast number of cichlid species. The lake had about 350 described species at the beginning of the 20th century, with an estimated 300 species yet to be described scientifically. The majority of the species in the lake were small and preferred shallow waters where they mostly grazed on algae. The Victorian cichlids look incredibly alike. They're colorful fish, primarily featuring reds, yellows, and blacks, which they use to attract mates. In fact, while fighting for a female, their colors can become intense, making them look extremely impressive. The Victorian cichlids are all believed to have descended from 2 species of African river cichlid that made their way into the lake about 15,000 years ago. And that is what scientists find particularly fascinating about the cichlids of Lake Victoria. Despite only a relatively short history in the lake, their diversity is through the roof. African Rift Valley cichlids have a unique biological feature called adaptive radiation, which is the phenomenon whereby one lineage spawns numerous species that evolve specializations to an array of ecological roles. And this speciation occurs dramatically fast. In the early 1900s, 80% of the biomass in Lake Victoria was comprised of cichlid species. But because of their small sizes, people needed to capture huge numbers in order to feed a growing population. The lake was already overexploited in the first half of the 20th century. But then someone got an idea. The lake lacked any large species of fish, so the Nile perch was brought to the lake and introduced in 1954. These massive fish can grow up to 2 meters in length, and so were believed to be a valuable asset to the fishing industry in the region. Unfortunately, they're also voracious predators. Initially, the Nile perches didn't do much. Their numbers remained low for about 30 years. But in the 1980s, their population exploded. By 1988, the biomass of the lake had changed from 80% cichlids to 80% Nile perch. And in order for the perch to get more numerous, they needed to consume the majority of the cichlids in the lake. Today, half of Lake Victoria's native cichlid species have gone extinct, and many more are endangered. And with so few cichlids left in Lake Victoria, algae has been left unchecked. Major blooms have depleted the lake of nutrients and oxygen, making the habitat even less hospitable for the remaining species. The negative effects of the Nile perch introduction are farther reaching than just the lake itself. In the past, as the people who lived on the lake fished the small endemic cichlid species, they could easily dry them in the sun to store them for future consumption. But this wouldn't work with the large, oily Nile perch. Instead, the fish needed to be smoked in order to be preserved. This led to mass deforestation around the lake as people sought wood for their fires. And as the forests were destroyed, shoreline erosion occurred, filling the waters with silt and, again, making the habitat unlivable. Today, many Victorian cichlids are more abundant in captivity than in the wild. The most popular species include obliquidans, Haplochromis species number 44, Pundamelia nyrerii, and the Haplochromis Kenya gold. Unfortunately, in captivity, most of these species are kept together by novice aquarists, and much of the domestic stock today is highly hybridized. Moving south from Lake Victoria is Lake Tanganyika. It's the longest lake in the world and the second oldest, being at least 9 million years old. The lake is shared by 4 nations: Tanzania, Democratic Republic of Congo, Burundi, and Zambia. While it has the lowest species count of the 3 African lakes, it has the highest genera count, owing to its great age. This means that Tanganyika displays the greatest variety of cichlid shapes and habits of any of the African Great Lakes, and the species are truly special. There are 250 known species, with many yet to be described. The lake is home to some of the smallest cichlids in the world, the shell dwellers. These tiny fish are carnivores that feed primarily on zooplankton. Many species rely on empty freshwater snail shells for shelter and breeding. The lake also houses one of the largest species of cichlids, the giant cichlid, also known as the emperor cichlid. It has males that grow up to 90 centimeters in length, making it possibly the largest cichlid in the world. They're piscivorous, lurking along the shores of the lake looking for smaller fish to eat. There are many extremely peaceful schooling species, like the Pritchardi and the Cyprochromini. These fish are similar to damselfish found on coral reefs, and they fill a similar ecological niche. There are also the frontosas, large blue and black cichlids with huge lumps on their heads, similar to the lionhead cichlids that we saw earlier. The julies and the lemon cichlids are long and skinny, keeping close to rocks and forming harems with a single male trying to keep control of his group of females. There are the featherfins, with males that have amazing iridescent colors and long fins used to attract mates. The black calvus is one of my personal favorites. They're laterally compressed, having upturned mouths, beautiful patterns, and are particularly rewarding to keep in the home aquarium because of their slow growth and difficulty. But perhaps one of the most interesting of the Tanganyika cichlids are the vast array of Tropheus. There are at least 6 species, each showing a huge range of color variation depending on what area of the lake they're found in. They swim in schools along the shores of the lake and graze on algae, similar to tangs in coral reefs. The fish are notoriously difficult to keep in captivity and have a bit of a cult following among aquaculturists. Some of the most interesting species are the Tropheus duboisi, who start life dark black with bright white spots before transitioning into their adult forms, which have blue heads and a yellow band around the middle. And the Tropheus mori, which have at least 40 different color morphs. The most famous of the African Great Lakes is the furthest south. Lake Malawi straddles the borders of Mozambique, Tanzania, and of course, Malawi. It's home to the greatest density of freshwater fish species in the world. With at least 850 described species, some scientists estimate that only about 50% have actually been discovered. The reason for such massive diversity lies in the topography of the lake itself. Fluctuating from shallow to deep water rapidly, the lake has countless microclimates. With many cichlids being highly territorial and preferring shallow water, they have very little motivation to explore new regions, ending up trapped in the little section of the lake that they call home. And every beach, every island, every rocky outcropping has its own set of unique species. Unlike Lake Tanganyika, Malawi only has 3 major groups of cichlids: the mbunas, the haplochromis, or the Haps for short, and the Peacock cichlids. The 3 can be differentiated primarily by their body shapes and their habits. The mbunas are easily distinguished by their heads, which are generally rounder than other cichlid species. These fish congregate in huge numbers, however, they do not school. In some cases, up to 20 fish per square meter of a section of lake can occur. They're highly territorial and aggressive in home aquariums, though almost all of them are strictly algae eaters. Most species are some combination of black, blue, and yellow, with some interesting exceptions like the pullet cichlid, which is nearly white, and the hongi cichlid, which can be purple with a yellow or orange blaze. Often, both males and females show a lot of color, and in some cases they show extreme sexual dimorphism, like in the case of the Aratus cichlids, in which they all start yellow, but eventually the males turn blue. Some species of mbuna look amazing in the wild, but once they begin to breed in captivity, they lose almost all of their unique markings, such as the beautiful Chawere cichlid. After only a couple generations of domestic breeding, they lose most of their black. One of the largest groups of Malawi cichlids are the Haps. These fish have a more typically fishy shape, though there is much more variation in this group. Most of these species feed on other fish, and they've developed very unique features to do so. For example, several species have large lips. These species specialize in hunting other fish among the rocks on the lake bottom. One common example is the VC10 or Malomo cichlid. Another is the Mdoka white lips. Another species of hap is the eye biter. This species grows up to 23 centimeters in length and is called the eye biter as it's believed to target the eyes of its prey. There are the livingstoni, which drift along the bottom as if they're dead, and when a smaller fish passes, they lunge out and eat it. There's the red empress, which shows an amazing red, yellow, and blue color pattern. There's the star sapphire, with its amazing irregular spot patterns. And there's the electric blue hap, with its insane iridescent scales that are as bright as any blue damsel found on a coral reef. The final group of Malawi cichlids are the peacock cichlids. This group of fish gets their name from the amazing sexual dimorphism shown within the species. Females are all drab, being completely gray or brown, but males are extremely bright, with huge fins that they like to puff up to display for the females or warn off other males. The peacock cichlids are often found at greater depths than other species, preferring to stick close to the substrate or to hide in rock caves. As a result, they need to have the brightest scales possible in order to capture the little bit of light that makes it to the lake bottom. They are far less aggressive than the mbunas and have 22 recorded species. These include the bright yellow regal peacock, the red and blue Freyberg's peacock, the endangered blue orchid peacock, and one of my favorites, the sulphurhead peacock. Peacocks have also been highly strain-bred in captivity, and there are quite a few strains available that don't exist in the wild, including the OB peacocks, strawberry peacock, and the German red peacock. These cichlids often have obvious egg spots on their anal fins. Like most cichlids, they're mouth brooders, meaning that females protect their eggs and their young by holding them in their mouth. During reproduction, the males find a spot to display. This can be a pit that they dig in the sand, a cave in the rocks, or an open stretch of water. They brighten their colors, flare their fins, and work to scare away any other males that come into the vicinity. Once a female is drawn in, an interesting circular dance happens. The male and the female swim, face to tail, around in circles. As the female drops her eggs, she has an uncontrollable urge to store them in her mouth. As soon as they drop, she scoops them up. But the spots on the male's anal fin trick her into thinking that they are also her eggs. As she picks up her eggs, she also nips at the male's egg spots. This triggers the male, and the eggs are fertilized in the female's mouth. The female will then carry the eggs and young fry for up to 36 days, during which time she will not eat. Once the fry are too big to fit in her mouth, they swim off and are ready to fend for themselves. And that's it for today's video. Sorry if it wasn't up your alley. I've personally kept African cichlids for many years, so this was a bit of a passion project for me. Next time you're at an aquarium store, stop and give the cichlids a look. Hopefully you'll have a new appreciation for these amazing fish. I want to thank my patrons, Kasha, Lael, April, and Colby. Thanks to you, I'm able to continue making videos like this. And if you want to have a say in what I make next, consider supporting me on Patreon. The link is in the video description below. Also, before you go, please give the video a like and a comment. I'm on my way to 3,000 followers. As always, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.